Why haven't I played Assassin's Creed 3? One word: Skyrim! On the open world front, my time was already being entirely absorbed by that wonderful game, but I had expressed an interest in the Assassin's Creed series, even going so far as to buy the first 2 games to prep up. But my interest peaked when this trailer came out.
The time is now near at hand which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy leaves us only the choice of brave resistance or the most abject submission. We have, therefore, to resolve to conquer or die.
Holy mother of God! There's no way this game could suck! What in the holy hell was that mess? My God, I just threw away 10 hours of my life in pursuit of one of the most meaningless plots in existence. Okay, calming down. Let's discuss this monstrosity in a somewhat calm manner. What? So, the appeal of this series was supposedly similar to the Hitman series. You're given a target, thrown out into a big open level, and you have to figure out how to kill him. Fair enough. But the thing is, that happens maybe 5 times in this game as a main mission, and half of them throw you into an extremely scripted scenario with no leeway, with the rest of the game consisting of meaningless mini-games and side quests. Did I miss the assassin in the title? You betcha! But aside from the obvious lack of oversight in the Assassin's Human Resources department, what does the game give us that might be worth throwing down some cold hard cash for? Well, it all comes down to how side questy you feel, as opposed to just getting shit done. It's almost as if the game developers wanted to distract us from the crappy, non-responsive controls, badly designed missions, and terrible plot by weighing us down with so much arbitrary bullshit that we just tune it all out and become mindless drones for the scamming. Perhaps I'm being too harsh, but it's hard to feel sympathy for a game that spreads itself so thin on game mechanics that all we're left with is an unfocused mess and a sore bumhole. You play as a charming Brit named Charles Matham. Wait, what? Oh, apparently we're supposed to be playing as this other dude. So after an opening couple of hours, which move at the pace of an incontinent glacier, we finally get to play as a man so devoid of personality that he would fit right in next to the sparkly vampires and suspiciously macho werewolves of Twilight. It's not that he doesn't emote, but he's so monotone in his behavior that he just becomes annoying and cliche.
I thought it might bring clarity or instill a sense of accomplishment, but all I feel is regret.
Connor's existence is being relived by series hero Desmond Miles, who is infinitely more interesting and quite frankly should have been the star of the show, as he attempts to sift through Connor's memories to locate a key which will save humanity. The sci-fi aspects of this game I liked, the Animus affording many opportunities gameplay-wise to prank whatever historical figure seems to be the villain of the moment. Even if the modern-day plot gets heavy-handed near the end, at least it's not Connor's burden to handle. Speaking of which, let's get back to that trailer. It seemed to hint at a game where you would be a heavy player in the history of America. Instead, the Revolution business sort of falls by the wayside 9 missions in. It isn't mentioned again until the epilogue 3 missions later. Go team! Instead, we get an odd plot, wherein Connor participates in the critical early moments of the Revolution, without a single mention in the in-game history books by the way, and then proceeds to get royally screwed by the rebels, redcoats, and relatives, not precisely in that order. The whole plot honestly comes across as forced, with many of the supposed set-piece moments consisting of mini-games and lacking any sort of drama that might invest us in the story. Some characters change motivations on whim, while others get anticlimactic death sequences which come out of nowhere at the tail end of some obnoxious level design. Let's harp on that next, shall we? Do you remember how fun Hitman Blood Money's levels were? Now imagine if the levels had restricted you to one weapon, or just told you how to play the mission. That's AC3's approach to level design. You could be cruising along the rooftops when some optional objectives flash above your head, and then suddenly you jump off the roof because the optional objectives say you must touch the ground and do somersaults naked. Oh, okay, not really, but they can get teeth-grindingly retarded sometimes, especially if you want to do them. But the fact that they are not required to finish the game means that you can ignore them if you want, but many of the missions seem to be optimally designed for creative strategies, and the constant reminders of our failure to fall in line could ruin the hell out of what otherwise would have been a highlight in another game. What's worse is that many of them become annoying as hell for the stupidest reasons. Here's an idea for a fun level. Let's have you escort a man on horseback with him constantly shouting in your ear. Or let's have instant fail stealth missions because we haven't evolved out of that rut apparently. Or have me fight a platoon of baddies with nothing but my fists. The hunting side quests just proved to be as shallow as Connor's personality, who could hang out next to Kristen Stewart and be called the most boring one. There are no ways to really track animals. You just have to hop around the trees and hope for the best, which usually means waiting for an animal to walk under you and air assassinate. The combat controls can be a bit problematic as well, with predators forcing a sudden quick-time event in your ass that you better nail instantly, and when he gets surrounded by a mob of enemies, the fun begins. It doesn't help that Connor frequently refused my commands to block or do anything useful really while an enemy chopped him to pieces because he needed to finish his precious animations. And the stupid decision to relegate running and climbing to the same button led to some controller smashing stupidity, as Connor would run up a wall as the entire British army closed in around him, or grabbed the wrong ledge and caused an instant mission failure. When you do find a comfortable rhythm, however, the battles can be glorious to behold, but those moments are few and far between. Moving on, it's hard to get immersed in a game that constantly fills your HUD with icons and ceaseless reminders about your objectives. It would make more sense in a first-person game, but here it just clutters up valuable real estate and makes the game about as immersive as a cement swimming pool run by the Mafia. Oh, the game tries its hardest to endear itself with some pretty amazing ambient sound design, music, and graphics, but whatever joys are to be had are fleeting once you realize that, holy shit, I need to be saving George Washington right now. This is a problem when you attach a strong narrative drive to what is essentially an open-world game. It means that I never cease to feel incredibly guilty whenever I indulge myself in hunting some rabbits to earn a trivial amount of money. The fact that there is no way to improve Connor's abilities makes the entire open world essentially useless. Even the fun missions like the naval sorties and the few decent stealth em-ups got drowned out by a voice in the back of my head reminding me that I really should be doing something important right now. Just because you have a lot to do doesn't mean that it's worth it. You know what? The best missions in this game don't even involve Connor, they're Desmond's missions. The lack of needless bullshit and even icons above the enemies' heads made his missions that much more immersive and fun, however linear they might be. The fact that I would rather be playing what is essentially a small part of the game really highlights how lackluster this main campaign is. What can be said for the game is that it isn't horrible, it's just mediocre. Whatever joys to be had are counterbalanced by some of the worst missions I've ever played. I don't even want to play the other games in the series now. This was my introduction and it performed about as well as Rebecca Black minus the auto-tune. I wish you all the best if you can wring some enjoyment out of it, but you're better off reading into War of the Revolution, making some sock puppets, and role-playing as a pink fluffy unicorn dancing on a rainbow.
How could this have happened?
We're on our own now.